All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is John Donadio. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Association of Counties, and I'm going to welcome you to, I think this is our fourth in a series of virtual workshops this year. This topic is on reducing recidivism in youth. It's based on the very successful program implemented by the Camden County Youth Services Commission. We'll have our president, Camden County Commissioner John Young, introduce our guest speaker in a minute, but just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, we're happy to answer them. Rosy's happy to answer them, our guest speaker. Just make sure you put them in the Q&A. The chat box is for us to communicate with each other in case there's any issues. This presentation will be available on our website after tomorrow, and we will make sure to email it to everyone who's registered for this event as well. And I, of course, want to thank Angela Wolf, who always does a terrific job in hosting all the technology stuff that I'm awful at. So thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. And with that, it is always my pleasure to introduce NJAC's president and Camden County Commissioner John Young for the introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Donadio. Always a pleasure. And also, I want to thank John for allowing us to make this presentation, right? Because it's really hard to promote or sell the fact of how we've always talking about youth, and we're always talking about, when we talk about Department of Corrections or with youth, and it's always about the arrest. It's always about how they got there, right? And so often we get lost in the fact that we can't tell the story on our successes and the things that we're doing in a positive light to make sure that recidivism is alive and kicking, right? So, youth recidivism is, or the reoffending of youth offenders is a complex issue with significant social and economic implications. Factors contributing to this phenomenon includes the lack of access to education, unsustainable family environments, and limited to employment opportunities for at-risk youth. Addressing youth recidivism requires a multifaceted approach combining preventions and rehabilitation efforts. Investing in quality education, mentorship programs can provide essential tools for these individuals to break the cycle of crime. Moreover, implementing restorative justice practices, counseling and vocational training can add to their re-engagement, if you will, into society. It is crucial for communities and policymakers to make collaboratively to create a supportive environment that promotes rehabilitation, reduces recidivism rates, and ultimately ensures a brighter future for our youth. And I can sincerely say, I found the gem, right? And we're very, very lucky and fortunate to have Rosy Arroyo in our county. Second to none. She is very passionate about what she does, and she will go to the hilt, right? There's no stone unturned. There's no blind corner, and she really is trend-setting here in Camden County, and we are so very blessed to have her as an administrator here for our youth services. She spearheaded efforts to reduce arrests among youth and implemented innovative programs and initiatives that support community engagement. And I'm sure at the end of this presentation, you will see that we are very serious about reducing that recidivism here in Camden County. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you Rosy Arroyo. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me time to share some of what Camden's been up to for the past few years. So I will share my screen. Just give me a moment while I transition. Okay, great. So today we're going to be focusing on Camden County Youth Services, reducing recidivism through youth engagement and community partners. And I'm going to go over somewhat of a story of how we got to where we are today, because it's part of the year's work of hard work, partnerships, collaboration, and intentional dialogue between youth, families, and community with our stakeholders. So we had to make sure everything was really planned out in order for us to be more successful in the way we approach the work and transforming our youth justice system. So our objectives today are to go over what youth services are, our impact in 2022, how we got here, reimagining youth work in Camden County, authentic community-centered work, program design. So there's going to be a few examples of some of the programs that have been very successful here in Camden County that have been duplicated within the county in different townships, restorative and transformative justice hubs, and how we reimagine our local system. So for any of you that want to implement some of the things that we're doing here, or how to just create new pathways for young adults to be successful, there's 3 questions that I always ask everybody at the end of any conversation that we have here in Camden, and I'll pose those to you for you to take in and then see how you can internalize that and have conversations within your counties and communities. So every county has a youth services commission. There's 21 of us and 21 very amazing, awesome administrators that oversee all the youth programming that involves prevention to reentry services for youth in New Jersey. Every county has a certain allotment of funding that they get provided based on a formula by the state. And with that funding, we have a design process to evaluate and create programs specific to the needs of each of our communities. So you might see some similar things that your counties are running, but they're all very, and should be very specific to neighborhoods, towns, communities, or a county as a whole. We offer programs, again, from preventative mentoring services to mentoring services for youth coming home from out-of-home placement. Again, funding amounts are, based on the size of the county and arrest rates and youth population. Each county is currently working on a 2024-2027 3-year comprehensive plan and application. So give us a little grace as we work through a lot of data, as we're sifting through to really develop and design what the next 3 years look like. The COVID pandemic really did impact the way we implemented our work. We had to change trajectories in how we're implementing services. A lot of the things went virtual, still are, which has been beneficial, but we've also noticed a lot of things that changed. We've noticed a digital divide. There's been increase in need of food and access to just hygiene care in some of our schools and communities. So these are some of the things that we have to take into consideration when we're seeing young people in front of us, either at the police department and schools struggling or in court. So these are all things that each commission discusses at their planning table. And so here in Camden County, we're very, very specific on the type of approach that we utilize to support young people. It's a positive youth development approach. This has been around for quite a while, but we here in Camden have started implementing this in 2015, but really got into the work and training our stakeholders on understanding how to work with young people through a positive youth lens in 2020, when we were selected for an NEKC training grant to train stakeholders on this youth development approach. So this approach allows us to really foster and develop relationships with our families and our communities, and to create trust so that we know that we're working together instead of telling people what to do. We're working with them and making sure that we're hearing what they need to get to where they want to be. So in 2022, Camden County Youth Services Commission funded 19 programs. In 2022, we had about $1.2 million in funding. This past year, we received an additional allotment from the state, as did every other county, and we're about 1.5 million now to provide services for youth in Camden County. We served a total of 8,200 youth, unduplicated, a total of 374 families, with an additional 1,200 supportive family visits to our youth in detention. These visits were coordinated by our Youth Justice Family Partnership Program, which was very specific on the need to get families to see their young people when they're placed in out-of-home placement. This increase in visits actually really supported young people to get through their court process, to ensure they didn't violate any alternative once they're released from their from detention into an alternative in the community, and also help develop and reunify families once they're separated because of the justice system. So this program really was helpful in helping coordinate all that, especially during the pandemic. It was very, very helpful for all of us that we found a way to allow families additional access to get laptops and computers in their homes so they can access visitations with their families. So I'm just going to give you a short timeline of about maybe 7+ years worth of work. So I'll start in 2013. In 2013, the Camden County Youth Services Commission, along with the County Council on Juvenile Justice Systems Improvement, which focuses on policy and practice change in every county, each of you have one, had sat down and really looked at some of the things that we were seeing specifically here in Camden County. Our juvenile section chief at the time with the prosecutor's office saw a need to really enhance the work that was happening to reduce the amount of low-level offenses in court. So they sat down and really did this really good work and planning around enhanced station house adjustments here in Camden. Ocean County was the other county that piloted the similar program. Since then, our program has expanded and continues to be successful, and I'll show you some additional information about that later. But that was the start of us really evaluating some of the things that we were seeing in court. We noticed that as adults, if there was a violent crime that had occurred, we did some additional digging and noticed that some of the things that those individuals had in common was runaway, truancy, and removal from school, whether voluntary or involuntary. So those are the things we started to need to focus on to make sure that our young adults were getting access to resources that would support them. So expanding diversion efforts at the front end was going to help us do that. In 2014, we started working on deep end reform in Camden County. So we were selected as a site with Annie Casey Foundation to reduce the amount of youth in out-of-home placement, specifically for Black and Latino youth here in Camden County. That work came with a really deep analysis of what our court system and our justice system looked like here. From that stemmed the need to engage law enforcement. So that started happening in 2015, 16, and 17, really deep dive into our communities and really understanding what the needs of police departments were. So based on the data that was as a result of the deep end reform analysis, we selected 7 communities in Camden County to work with their police departments, and if they wanted to invite their school districts to come to the table to provide them technical assistance. Each of these police departments received $2,500 a year to do additional station house work programs, provide resources and activities, events for young people in their community to increase relationships and, just enhance the access to resources that these families may not have had prior to this engagement. In 2017, we started doing community engagement and asset mapping, and I sent Angela the link. She'll put it in the chat. This is what we collected from these 7 communities through a survey process, both English and Spanish. So we created an asset map in partnership with HopeWorks in Camden. And this asset map was to get us to get really, really deep into our communities, find our neighbors that knew how to bake and wanted to teach young people how to bake, or a mechanic that had time to share on weekends how to work with youth and show them how to change a tire, change the oil. So we were looking for assets that would be willing to participate in programming or just do volunteer work with our young people. This asset map also collected information on libraries, schools, nonprofit organizations that do programming, and other things, so that when we as a community say there's a young person on probation in Clemington, right? So we can zone in on that Clemington portion of the asset map, and we'll find all the resources available for them. So this is available to our stakeholders whenever they need access to resources, and we're still working on expanding what this map looks like and how we could utilize it for different purposes in the future. Then in 2018, based on the conversations with community engagement, law enforcement, the deep end reform assessment, we started to have to look at how we do change from within Camden County, right? So what does it look like to really tap into what's already happening without duplicating to support our young people and their families? And so we decided to start engaging grassroots programming, the small organizations that don't always have funding, maybe organized by one or two people in the community. Those organizations came to several roundtable discussions so that we could start talking about capacity building. What does it look like for them to engage more youth, specifically youth on probation, or youth that come across with law enforcement, or youth coming home from incarceration? And so what would it look like to enhance their program? What kind of supports do they need to apply for grants and things like that? So this grassroots movement really pushed some of the efforts that you see now in Camden City, in Winslow, and Lindenwold, where there's a lot of organizations coming to the table just to volunteer and be a part of the work that's happening. And so this has been successful in tapping into a network that doesn't normally get the assistance they need to be supported and be successful in the program efforts that they do provide. Has been able to get us to a point where we can call someone in Berlin, we can call someone in Pennsauken. If there's a young person or a family that needs something or needs a mentor, we can tap into these organizations in those communities. Then in 2021, we were selected by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. I should say 2020, we were selected by the Annie E. Casey Foundation as a train the trainer for reimagining juvenile justice 4.0. So this training was a deep dive in how do we collaborate, what does cross systems services look like, how do we implement a positive youth development model within the work that we're doing, and how do we really engage youth and families. And so this training was offered to all of our stakeholders here in Camden County. All the courts were, staff were trained, prosecutor's office, public defenders, probation, some of our parole officers with the Juvenile Justice Commission, a lot of community advocates, families, parents, and youth. So they were all part of this, and we continue to offer the training as leadership or as change happens within organizations. And now finally, where we're at now in 2023, we were selected as one of the 4 pilot sites in New Jersey to create and implement a restorative and transformative justice hub. The other sites are Trenton, Newark, and Patterson. So the 4 counties have been working together to really implement this work, and I'll talk about it more a little bit later. So that gives you an idea of the work that's been happening since 2013, and I'll discuss why this was important to go over. So since we started working with law enforcement and really engaging their needs by, doing surveys and providing quarterly technical assistance meetings, honing in designing programs specific for them to divert young people, our arrest, court filings, and court filings for serious offenses have reduced. So you can see the trend going down since 2016, kind of stayed steady from 2018 to 2019, but 2020, there was a significant reduction. Now, again, I'm still reviewing data from 2020 to 2022. As every other Youth Service Commission administrator is doing for the comprehensive plan. So we'll have updated numbers, but based on what I've been seeing, this reduction continues to follow this trend. And so we're looking forward to seeing some of the work that we've been implementing after pandemic on how it's impacted the way we, really engage with our families through this process. This one talks about curbside warnings, station house adjustments compared to court filings. So in 2021, I believe, the Attorney General's office had a directive put out on updates on transforming the youth justice system and enhance the work that law enforcement does with young people. We're now tracking curbside warnings and station house adjustments, and this is what the first couple of months of 2021 for us look like. So we had every police officer curbside warnings happen all the time. It's not always possible to capture that information. Every police department across the state of New Jersey does the best they can. Station house adjustments are really important to have, specifically in communities of color, where we need additional programs to support our young people so that they aren't charged with anything and they could be supported within community instead of going through the court process. And we still see the court filings low compared to other years or for the first half of the year in 2021. But what the most significant change that we saw after we started working with the police departments you see listed here, these were the ones that were selected based on the data. In 2014, you see that our total dispositional cases were at 1601. And then by 2019, we went down by a little over 30%. This was a major win for us. We were just plugging along, attaching what additional diversion services we had, what mentoring program was here, what is Pine Hill doing, what is Winslow doing, and throughout the years we had to stop and pause and check. Let's evaluate this work. Is this engagement working? Do we have to shift? And it turns out the work that has been happening is really working for us. In fact, it's working so well that some of the work that we've started and piloted in some communities are being duplicated in others. So this shows just right off the bat how successful this work can be once you really plug in all the key players at the table. So we did all this by ensuring there was community adjustments, direct referrals to programs without having to go through a court process, without having to get to a point where you're in crisis. There's curbside warnings. Again, we talked about station house adjustments that offer people, young people, a way out of the justice system by diverting them to programs. And enhanced station house adjustments are programs that are attached to counseling services or additional mentoring services that law enforcement can provide directly to the families. And then some cases we'll have to have discussions with the prosecutor's office to ensure it's a proper referral to the program. And so here in Camden, we utilize a family crisis intervention unit to do that work, which is our Family Links program. And I'll share a little bit more about that later. So when we have access to these types of avenues and we partner with schools, families, and community, you reduce system involvement. You see a reduction in court, you see a reduction in violations, because this is the way I guess the best way to compare it to is triage it in the community. So police have the options to do direct referrals, which is if they come in contact with a family, they can refer directly to any program in the community. The family can take that up or not, but normally what we've seen, the direct referrals, most families take the option to participate in a program because they're asked about what programs or what things they would need to be successful or to get past whatever they're seeing in front of them. Then community adjustments, curbside warnings, station house adjustments, and enhanced station house adjustments. We have a very big diversion pool of services that has worked for us, and we still look to enhance that. But having the opportunity and law enforcement having these options really is going to be what gets you to seeing some of the same kids over and over again in court or in front of law enforcement or at school being suspended. So all that work led us to creating this model here in Camden that works for us. So everything is youth-centered. I talked about having youth-centered and community-centered conversations. Everything happens with the youth at the table in discussions or making sure that their voice is heard. Probation will not move forward without making sure that the youth at the table or the youth involved is provided options and has a say in their pathway to success. They're the first ones to tell us, like, Rosy, I see everybody at the table, but we're missing a young person, or we're missing a family member, or we're missing a parent in the community or community member. All of our system partners have been trained and have changed internally and transformed systems themselves so that we know that the most important person in the room is that youth. And so all of these things are surrounding that youth can help them get to where they need to be, knowing that there could be some missteps, but we're all supposed to be in a restorative mindset to ensure that we allow space for healing and harm reduction. So part of this work and explaining it to community was sharing everybody the approach in phases. And I think this was the best way to talk to community members that probably either didn't have an understanding of the justice system, that we needed help getting buy-in so that they could support our youth, or even just people to make it a simpler conversation on how we can get these kids out of justice involvement through so many exits in the community and through the process. So all these exits on the pathway to out-of-home placement, whether it's incarceration with the juvenile justice system, local detention, or on probation being sent to out-of-home placement for treatment or services, there's all these exits that we have an opportunity to get it with that family, engage them properly, and support them so that we can remove them from being in the deeper end of the system, which is out-of-home placement. So each decision point has very specific programs that I'll share some of them with you that we need to foster and enhance. Specifically in New Jersey right now, the statewide consensus is refocusing on detention alternatives post-pandemic, so that we can get a better idea of what's happening right now after we've all experienced a traumatic time period. So those are the things that we're looking to, but making sure that as we go through this exit or this highway, these exits have plenty of opportunities for young people to access. And so part of the how, we have a youth-led and adult-guided format here. So nothing happens, no program is designed, no resources are provided without talking to our youth. Our youth are at the table, they have voting rights. We have a youth council with 2 voting youth members on our Youth Services Commission that are very vocal. There's a couple of billboards in Camden County with their images on them, advocating to increase access to resources for youth to be successful instead of incarceration. They're up and down, if you're ever in Camden County, they're up and down Admiral Wilson Boulevard and I believe Pennsauken. So we have discussions that are youth-led. So youth have a say in opportunities and they're actually engaged in the process. They are a meaningful partner and they have an ownership of the work, and they also hold us accountable, right? So they're not going to commit to anything or helping us support or market programs or, share resources or share information with their peers without us making sure that they have a say at the table and that we commit to being held accountable by their needs. Adult guided is us being supportive as adults, as coaches, not telling them what to do, but asking them, how can we help you get there? What is it that you need to do this presentation? What do you need to be successful in school this year? Or what can we do for you to help you be successful on your detention alternative? So these are things that we have to make sure we pause and do. Our probation office here in Camden, or Camden Vicinage, has been very adamant about making sure everything that's either placed on a court order or they recommend to a young person, that they have a say in how it's developed, when they access, and the opportunity to show that they're ready to be at a space where they can move forward outside of this court process. It also puts the responsibility on the adults to develop the relationship versus the young person. Oftentimes we have young people that come into programs there and they may not be successful in it. And they AWOL, they don't show up, they don't respond to the mentor or an EM officer or a probation officer or anyone, any other adult, a teacher. The problem is that we have historically, we as adults put all the ownership on young people, and half adults that I know sometimes can't even take responsibility for certain things like waking up and eating breakfast on time to get to work on time, right? So it's like, how do we have this expectation of young people to develop a relationship with someone they just met, specifically someone that has a uniform or a badge that's there to supervise them? So it's up to adults to develop that relationship and build that trust with that young person until that young person is ready to open up and be a part of this community and develop a relationship as well. But to make a young person do that's probably out of everything I've learned throughout these years since starting this work, that's been key, that making sure that our adults and our partners here know that it's up to us to develop those relationships. And so right now I'm going to transition into some of the programs that we've developed to specifically address some of the things that we've been seeing through the court process to reduce recidivism and to ensure that our families are navigating, our youth are navigating and getting out of the system in general. So we have a diversion program. Our Youth Justice Family Partnership Program started out as a pilot in 2017 and was only funded about $65,000. From day one of that program, they automatically started out in court, helping families navigate. Then they expanded to do workshops and trainings with families on understanding the justice system, educational supports, understanding IEPs, understanding your probation requirements, or what is a detention alternative. They also did peer parent support groups. So where parents whose young people were impacted by the justice system met weekly, they still meet weekly, so that they can kind of have a space for themselves and help each other kind of work through this process. So our program yearly serves anywhere from 374 families. This year we're in September, and we already have 540 families served. And we stopped doing detention visits earlier this year just because we needed to expand staff and funding wasn't available for that yet. Our program also engages with law enforcement. So law enforcement calls the family peer partners directly to navigate young people who have autism, who may be dealing with some issues at school, need additional support for IEP or 504, kids who have been suspended. They call our program to ensure that there's an easy transition back into school. So this program is really helpful in guiding the parent to support the young person properly in these areas, right? Whether it's prevention or reentry services. So they help that family navigate that. So to reduce the tension within the household, the conflict, and to help reunify from any step of the court process. This is one of my favorite programs. When we started working with police departments, I should say it was probably one of the most difficult conversations I've had. I've never worked with law enforcement directly. There was always just passing. They sat at the table, but we really didn't engage. After doing the assessment and really pulling these communities together, I showed up at every police department that you saw listed earlier with a binder full of data and showing these are all the things that are occurring here in your community. These are all the ways I could help you and support in some of the work that we could do together. And I kind of left them with a pile of information. I gave them all the things that we could partner with. And then little by little, each of the police departments really started buying into the work and getting support. And so one of the ones, Chief Winters out of Pine Hill, his team, the school district, the township, volunteers, the youth, developed a program called Project Success. And it's a gaming program. It's an after-school gaming program that started off as a diversion. So young people that came across law enforcement would be diverted to their school district, stay after school, and game. And so part of the gaming program, they had access to PS4s, Switches, board games, but they also had counseling sessions in the beginning of the start period. So they would touch base with their guidance counselor or the SRO, who's phenomenal in Pine Hill, and they would work through anything that they needed, academic-wise or anything. So they have esports tournaments. They have reentry navigation supports. If a young person's suspended, they use this program to really help them navigate back. Education support. So one of the biggest things I want to share about this program is there was a 14-point increase for students that participated in this program over the time period of 2020 to 2022. So there has been, every year, there's about 140 youth in the program. It ranges anywhere from 120 to 140 youth in the program. And because it's so successful and the reduction that you saw in the earlier chart and dispositions from Pine Hill, Lindenwold is now currently duplicating the same program. We're working with the school district and the police department, and they're currently putting all this together so that we could have the same program there to help their students as well. I believe we'll be placing that one in the middle school. And we started this program with only $30,000. And so that's just enough to support purchasing equipment, providing additional costs for supporting staff that are staying after, volunteers, meals, and equipment, and anything else that the youth may need throughout the year for programming. And so earlier I mentioned the station house adjustments, direct referrals, and enhanced station house adjustments. So we're lucky that our family crisis intervention unit, Family Links here, provide the following things, and they are provided based on local mandates and state requirements from the Family Crisis Intervention Manual. So we usually serve anywhere from 96 youth to 120. Last year we served 96. We provide anger management workshops. They're 4 to 8 week sessions, depending on time, on how often they meet. Sexting workshops, bias, anti-bullying, cyberbullying workshops for anyone that's either referred through law enforcement, schools. There's specific seminars on sexting and anger management. And then the counseling services that it's up to 8 weeks for families that are experiencing truancy with youth, runaway, and family conflict. So this program is really considered our first line of defense. And even if a young person is on probation, they can access this program for any of the components that we offer. And so normally the family conflict one is the one where people are accessing the most. Lately, for the past year and a half, we've been seeing a lot more bias and anti-bullying referrals. And so they're referred to this program to go through workshops and fulfill their station house adjustment or their direct referral. Again, this is another one of my favorite programs. Dispositional programming is community coaches. This program was specifically designed by youth on probation and probation officers. So we've met together. I think this was in 2018 or 2019, developed this program that was a model for older youth on probation, I would say 16 to 21, to develop coaching, life skills, mentoring, but we utilize the credible messaging model, transitional supportive services, they help coordinate services, and we only, our contract only covers 15 youth per year because of the intensity of the program. So the youth leaves when they're ready. It's absolutely optional. It's voluntary. This one cannot be court ordered. But our actual program has been at capacity since May. We're on a wait list right now. Youth want to be a part of this program. They relate to our credible messengers. It's extremely successful. Even once the kid transitions out of the program, they still have access to the agency and the credible messengers they met because it's part of the coaching and expanding assets model here we have in Camden. So this program is great. It's part of our innovations. So we have a specific model that we follow, but we're expanding and we're going to be implementing this within our restorative hub. And last, we partnered with Camden County College to provide free academic access for young people who've been impacted by the justice system. So they get academic guidance, college enrollment, or a trade certification. They get coaching by specific staff at the college. They're provided supportive services. So if they need childcare, additional funding for meals or books, they have access to that. It's 6 youth per year. We wanted to see what this would look like, and we're already at capacity. All 6 youth have accessed the program, and we are at seeing about 3 youth who have come home from JJC and 3 other youth who are on probation. So we're really excited about this work because it's allowing young people to access the programs that are meeting their needs specifically, especially since the college is really starting to engage and work with our families who've been impacted by the justice system. So we're looking forward to see what this looks like in the future and expanding the access to more youth in our community. So I know that's so far it's a lot. But what's next for Camden and New Jersey, because we're one of 4 sites, is the Restorative and Transformative Justice Hub. So it was established, public law in 2021. There's legislation that creates 4 pilot sites in New Jersey, Camden, Patterson, Trenton, and Newark. And there's 6 goals attached to the Restorative Justice Hub. It's very intense. There's 9 required supportive resources that are to be in that hub. And it's a reentry program as well. So the hub should be serving anywhere from 10 to 26-year-olds at any given time, based on where they're coming home from, or if they're involved or with court or engaging law enforcement. And so there's a lot of foundational background around restorative justice that's going to help us move forward and continue the reduction that you've seen earlier in the earlier slides. There was clear definitions in the legislation. I just laid them out here for you, but some of the things that we've been working on is the component of community conferencing and circle keeping to ensure that we really have a format and framework of restorative justice here, and a foundation understanding so that we could really be successful in how we divert young people in this new way. I can tell you right now, Camden has not done any restorative work prior to this, but the other cities have some programs that do restorative justice. Now they're scaling it up based on this legislation. And so here in Camden, this is our landscape that we're looking at. And so all that work that I talked about earlier, engaging community, really talking to young people, bringing grassroots to the table, engaging law enforcement in schools, being on the same page through a youth development lens, creates these sections so that we can build together this landscape we needed to really implement this work. If we hadn't done that work for the past 4 years, even the most recent work after pandemic, we wouldn't be prepared to be establishing a pilot site or a hub, because we weren't ready to have conversations through our cross systems collaboration efforts. So because we're at a point where we all understand each other's role and really can process the work that's happening and believe in more progress that can happen, we're able to do this. Now, it's not easy. It's hard work. It's intentional. It's very focused. There's a lot of training, a lot of policy changes, a lot of practice changes, but it's worth the effort to really consider what this could look like in your county. And there's already discussions on expanding it to other sites in New Jersey. And so for us, building the framework, this is a 3 to 5 year process. And I just want to share that with everybody, because this does not happen overnight. It doesn't happen over a year. It doesn't happen over 3 years. It really takes up to 5 years to really go through everything I just discussed with you earlier. So we here in Camden are in a good space because we've been building our grassroots. We've been having conversations about next steps and what does it look like to do something different. Working with the school districts, working with probation or the prosecutor's office. So we've started working and acknowledging our eternal truths as it relates to restorative justice. For us, I consider us being right now at building together. We're close to the horizon of this work where we're actually implementing community circles. But each layer has very specific tasks that we went through in that timeline, that had we not gone through, we wouldn't be in the space we're in right now to be able to do this work and do it effectively. And so the hubs I mentioned have to offer different components. Law enforcement, we have to work with law enforcement, which we have a great partnership here in Camden City for it. We have to establish more restorative interventions. So what does that look like? Doing direct diversion referrals to the restorative justice hub instead of going to court, diverting court involved young people to the hub instead of finalizing the court process through the normal process. Access programs, so mentoring, financial skills, after school programs, education, training. We have to increase access for young people in the city to this hub. We have to coordinate with our systems, make sure everybody's on the same page, that all of our partners are at the table. We have to offer mental health supports or increase access to that. and we have to increase access to participation in education. So we have to help reduce truancy or absenteeism within the school, reduce suspension and expulsion rates in partnership with the school district through the work of the hub. And so here are the specific services that Camden's going to be offering. Every county has to offer this, every site, I should say. Mental health, education, employment, housing, financial literacy, life skills, social services, and preventative mentoring. So that's a lot. So we're going to be focusing on the front end of the system and making sure that we really get that in a strong place so that we can move forward with the work. Specifically, here is how Camden's going to do it. I've shared this model with our state representatives and our my counterparts in the other counties. This is how we're going to have referrals coordinated for the hub to reduce system involvement. The main priority is reentry services and diversion from initial system involvement. So we have a dual system referral process. Either you're accessing the hub for these resources or you're accessing the hub because of a justice involved issue. So based on the situation, you'll be diverted to different sections of the hub. But here's our model, and every community partner that you see at the table has committed to those specific areas. And this is how we plan to implement this vision. Circles that build foundations of healthy community for students. We are facilitating trainings. We're doing workshops in the community to educate our friends and families about the potential of restorative justice. And we're building a disciplinary process based on restorative justice values. So we're no longer looking at sanctions that are just focused punitive on things that go wrong, but really focusing on healing and reducing the harm from something that occurred, de-escalation, all of that. These are going to be handled through conflict circles. So again, I mentioned this is a 3 to 5 year process. Our pilot is only 2 years. And so our program is going to be running in Camden City. It's going to be operating from 8 to 10, 7 days a week, and it's going to serve ages 10 to 26. There's going to be case managers, peer parent specialists, and peer support specialists. We're going to have welcome home circles or community circles. The Board of Social Services will be in the space, workforce development, the Camden County College, any other continuing education or alternative education. We'll be having housing supports. We're partnered with the Housing Authority through their programming and funding for youth, for vouchers that need, for kids that need housing. We'll have family support services, childcare, food, furniture, transportation, connection with community coaches to navigate adulthood, and immediate contact with young people transitioning home through partnerships with probation, parole, or our youth center. So these are the things that our program, our lead agency has outlined, and we'll be working together to make sure it happens and as we get up and running. And so earlier I mentioned there's 3 things that I really ask every stakeholder after every single meeting we have on how do we do this work? How do we look at where we've been and where we want to go? So I always ask these questions. How does what we heard or learned today change or enhance your ability to advocate for youth and families through a positive youth development approach? This is key to ensuring that every component, whatever meeting you're in, whatever conversation you're having, is really focused on the youth lens. What are 2 or 3 concrete steps you could take to support youth to prevent system involvement or further system involvement? This takes some time. And I also ask people to look at this through an individual level. You as a person on a personal level, I should say, you as a professional within your organization, and you as an organization, because those 3 components of yourself actually give 3 different answers. And we need all those 3 to build an organic and genuine process for moving forward. And then what specific program, policy, or practice recommendation would you suggest as a community member or to your organization's leadership to help you make this and sustain this change? So after every conversation, whenever we talk about the hub, whenever we talk about planning for the funding that we're getting or want to apply for, these are the questions we ask ourselves. Like, what are we ready to do? and how can we commit to those to complete system changes. So I pose these to you in case you want to implement anything and what that looks like, and how this could move forward. Any of the resources, how does really all these programs engage and reduce recidivism? Yes, we're collaborating, but are we really taking the time to sit down with young people and have them design what their future looks like? So these are the things that we as a county go through on a monthly basis during our planning meetings, or throughout our conversations to focus on innovations and new projects. So that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I'm not sure where we are on time, but.
Yeah, you're right on time, Rosie. That was a terrific presentation. I don't see any questions. My only question is, where was this when I was growing up?
You know, it's a really intense rap process. Like, we have a prosecutor's office that's phenomenal. We don't often share the engagement that's happening because we all know the role we have to play. Sometimes, you know, our prosecutor should be at the table at the forefront talking about these things. Sometimes it should be Miss Washington from church. You know, sometimes it should be me. Sometimes it should be a teacher.
See those remarks coming out.
So it's super important to see the people that you want to see sharing this information with you. So we all know the role we play. So normally we only share what's happening when we're asked to in spaces like this.
So, and John, so, you know, listen, and the whole idea of it, right, is that, you know, us as a county, we can't do it by ourselves, right? The Youth Commission can't do it by themselves, right? So it's this real mindset change mission that we've been on, right? Because now we're trying to change a whole system that's been in place for however long it's been in place, right? So now we're trying to change, you know, and some of them is easier because some of you have some of these forward-thinking police departments and police chiefs that understand it and get it. And some are still in that old mindset, right? That you know, hey, the only way out of the problem is to arrest it, right? So, you know, this program and what we're doing here in Camden County is the biggest preventive measure that we can take in order to do it. And I want everybody on this on the webinar here to just think back for a second when you were a child, and think back for a second that you did something wrong, or you made a mistake, and you had a second opportunity for a diversion program when people didn't realize that there were diversions, right? It was just good community policing where our police officers understood the community. And I think that's where this program is really starting to bring those two facets back together. And then once that happens, you'll get this flourishing. You'll start to see those numbers drop off, right? So, you know, the program is only as good as its participants. And we're just really lucky here to have good partners. And then our lead partner is the prosecutor's office. I mean, think about that. We have the prosecutor's office on board with diversion tactics, right? Making sure that these youth have an opportunity to flourish and give them a second chance, right? And we do understand there are some youth out there that are just, it is what it is, right? But for the ones that we can save, right, we have to be able to do this in order to make sure that our youth have an opportunity to change and flourish. So, Rosy, again, I really thank you for all the work that you do for us. I am so blessed to be able to work with you and have you as an industry partner for sure. So thank you for all that you do for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, for Rosy, all of the comments are all just saying what a great presentation this was. So there were no questions. So you did a fantastic job. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We will make sure to share this PowerPoint presentation by email, and we'll post it on our website as well. So thank you everyone again, and look forward to seeing you at our next one, I think in November. So have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.
See you, everybody. Thank you.